responding to the proposition that the excess stock of war tanks is harming the U.S. So my opponent, her secondary claims were the excess stock of tanks is harming the environment, the economy, and the general public. She had some evidence on her outline to support her second claim, but didn't present any evidence in her speech. So on her first point, that the excess of stocks harms the environment, according to an article done by CNN about an hour's drive north of Reno, Nevada, the tanks have been collecting dust in the hot California desert because of a tiff between the Army and Congress. My opponent said that storing the tanks in deserts makes the land useless and keeps wildlife from growing. She provided no evidence, and I didn't find anything to support that outside of the little tiny word that I just read from that CNN article. From the same article, it said that if the Pentagon holds off repairing, refurbishing, or making new tanks for 3 years until new technologies are developed, the Army says it can save the taxpayers as much as $3 billion. However, in another one of the sources that she had on her outline, it claimed that the Pentagon wants to save the $3 billion by stopping work on these tanks for a few years to redesign them. And that it can't because the people who are manufacturing the tanks are like supporting the congressman, and it's making it so that that's not possible. Her last claim was that she said that there is a lack of funds going to government-funded programs and that taxpayer money is going towards making these weapons and that this is harming the general public. She, again, provided absolutely no evidence outside of just saying that, and I could not find any evidence to show that these extra tanks are specifically hurting people and the public. So, in conclusion, there isn't all that much evidence outside of just the economic, outside of the economic, it's not hurting anything outside of the economy, and she presented no evidence to support that.
Well, you set up the structure of the advocate's argument pretty clearly. On the environmental issue, you basically used the same information that the advocate used. You at least cited it, as you said. The argument that you're presenting is that there's no evidence that the wildlife has been hurt, and I think that that's a pretty reasonable demand to make, since the advocate is the one who made that claim. They're obligated to provide some proof, and you're saying that they failed to provide any such proof. I do think one of the things that you might point out is that this property has probably been designated for the military to use for some reason. It's not like they're parking tanks in some national park, and they said, we're not going to have any visitors at the national park right here because we're going to park the tanks here. This is probably government property. And by the way, there are millions of acres of government property, and how much acreage is being taken up by this? I don't know. You don't know. They don't know. At this particular point, there's nothing that suggests that there's some huge environmental danger here. And by the way, an hour outside of Reno, you know what's an hour outside of Reno? Nothing. At least north of Reno. East of Reno, west of Reno, you got Tahoe. But the rest of it is like, I'm sorry, if you've been in Nevada, there's a whole bunch of nothing there. So I'm trying to wonder what it is that these tanks are keeping from doing things. It just seems a little bit strange. The other argument gets a little confusing because there's this congressional issue that's going on And it was not clear to me exactly what Congress's issue with the military was, whether they wanted the tanks deployed now and they wanted to go ahead and spend the money later, or the military saying, no, we don't want to deploy the tanks, we're going to wait for the better tanks that are coming up, and we're going to save money because we don't deploy the tanks. It wasn't quite clear how that $3 billion was coming out. But if it's $3 billion, and they're talking about this is going to have a negative effect on the rest of the government and its funding here, well, let's put it into context. $3 billion, that's what the government spent this morning, buying paper clips. I'm sorry, the federal government spends, what is our federal budget? It's like $1 trillion or something ridiculous like that.
600 billion.
It's a bucket load, and this is not the thing that seems to be preventing us from funding something. Like you said, you don't have any evidence that links that specifically to any of those kinds of things that she's talking about. One of the things that you could do is maybe say, look, the budget for schools has gone up in every state in the country in the last 2 years. The budget for welfare programs has gone up at the federal level. The budget for all these things, environmental programs has gone up in the last 2 years. I don't know where the harm is occurring here, but it doesn't appear to be at the level. I mean, just a little bit of extra effort on a couple things. Think kind of, as they say, I hate that stereotype, think outside the box, kind of thing. Just kind of think about other ways to maybe approach the argument also, and then maybe you'd have a little bit more to say. I thought you made reasonable presses on the arguments, but, I think you need to be a little bit more assertive in your argument. All right, thank you.